Hello everyone and welcome back to the weekly Poker Showdown brought to you by PartyPoker. I am your host, Jaime Staples. And as you may have noticed, the weekly Poker Showdown is going to be about 50 weeks a year. About twice a year, I typically get some sort of chest infection or something like that. I'm knocked out. That was the case last week, so I've kind of been sick in bed and being boring. But back at it this week. Apologies if I have to cough a few times. I do in the interview later, but hopefully it'll still be interesting. We have a very great guest this week, Travis Darroch, also known as DramaticDegen on Twitch. He's coming off a 100K plus score all the way from a $22 satellite in the PartyPoker Million. So this is an incredible score for him, a life-changing score. We have a really good conversation talking about all things in regards to that tournament, his poker career, which has really been rocky and had some ups and downs, and streaming. So stay tuned for that interview. I think you're really going to like it. But before we do that, let's get into some of the online and live news. This week on the online felt, we obviously need to talk about the PartyPoker Million. Travis Darroch, known as DramaticDegen, taking home third place. So that's the notable for me, at least. One of my colleagues on the team, super happy for him. But 8 people made the final table. 8th place collected $9,490. And the three-way deal saw Them Kikando take home the most money for $114,876. So congratulations. The Teachery as well took home $107,000. So three-way, really big score there in the PartyPoker Million. Congrats to everyone that made a run at it. I tried a couple times to get in and failed. Now to get some of the live news, and there's a lot going on with the Caribbean Poker Party going on in the Bahamas. First thing we want to report on, Daniel Dvoris, legendary, great poker player, plays at the high stakes, won the Super High Roller Bowl at the Caribbean Poker Party. This is a $250,000 buy-in, and Daniel took it down for just over $4 million. It's actually the 6th edition of this tournament taking place in the Bahamas, so congrats to everyone taking part in obviously a massive event, $250K buy-in. Final table had a pretty stacked field, including Eric Seidel and Justin Bonomo at the final table. So pretty cool. Moving on to some more live news, someone that we just had on the podcast, Anatoly Filatov, won the 10K Millions High Roller at the Caribbean Poker Party. So he ended up taking down a $280,000 first place prize. And is this the start of the podcast run good? It could be. Maybe this is good luck to come on the podcast. Anatoly, congratulations on another big title, obviously coming off a $1 million score at the King's Casino in the Czech Republic. So absolutely amazing. He's on a huge heater, and wish him some congratulations on social media. Go over to his Instagram, let him know. Anatoly, absolutely amazing, man. Let's talk a little bit about some of the party poker news this week, and something I want to feature is you can now download your hand histories for your own use after the fact. So you can go into the My Game tab on Party Poker, and basically the hand histories are anonymized, so you're not going to be able to see the opponents you're playing against, but after the fact, you can download those hand histories, and then you can actually upload them into a poker tracker or a hold'em manager if you use a piece of software like that, so you can study your own game. So this is something that a lot of players asked for, and the feedback has been listened to, so you do have the ability to download your own hand histories. Just go to the My Game section on the client, and you'll be able to access it there. So that's it for the preamble this week. Let's get into the interview with Travis Darroch, again known as DramaticDegen, member of Team Online, a guy that I've known on Twitch for a long time, really hard worker, and so happy to see his success. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. It was a great time. Without further ado, enjoy. And with me today, I have Travis Darroch, better known on Twitch as DramaticDegen. This is a guy coming off an amazing score of over $100,000 in the new PartyPoker Million. So I thought this week would be a great week to have you on, better than any. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, good to be finally on it. I'm looking forward to this. So.
Yeah, cheers, man. So let's start with the tournament on Sunday, right? PartyPoker Million. You make a 3-way chop for over $100,000. So let's take it back to the start. Phase 1, day 1. What happens?
So this was actually, I was trying to win a satellite into the last day 1 the weekend before.
Right.
And I saw like one satellite left, and I figured this will probably work. I'll have enough time. And I won the satellite, but it was past late registration on the last day 1.
Okay.
So I guess I'll just play day 1 for the preceding week, right?
Right.
Played day 1A, got in with 28 big blinds into day 2.
Okay.
Here's the crazy thing about this whole situation. So this Sunday that I won the tournament,
right?
I was flying home from Vancouver.
Okay.
And there was huge weather problems, so we ended up having to land in the next city over. and that was like, a 60 to 90 minute drive. So I ended up getting home like 3 or 4 hours later than intended.
Right.
And day two was already an hour in, and I had been blinded down to 7 big
Oh my
blinds.
God. It's to 7 big blinds.
Yeah, I've
Wow.
been blinded down. I showed up an hour late for my day two grind, and I still managed to run it up to
Were you
top three.
tilting like when you were driving and trying to get home? Were you like on tilt, or what were you thinking
I
about?
just I just figured like the best thing I could do was kind of surrender to the fact that this is all out of my control, and to
Right.
just go home and play what I could. And I did decide not to stream because obviously like I'm still a little on edge and I
Yeah.
didn't want to flip out on stream. And I went, all right, well, if I make a deep run on party, I'll fire it back up again. And then what do you know? I promised myself if I made top 40, I'd turn the stream on. And
Yeah.
even then at with 40 left, I think I had like 18 big blinds. And I was like, oh man,
Right.
I don't want to like turn the stream on and then all of a sudden turn it off like two
Yes.
hands later.
No, I totally know what you mean with that, man. Like, you need to hype yourself up a little bit. It's a thing.
Uh-huh.
It's an event when you're streaming. So, like, if you can't just kind of willy nilly like fire and be in there. It's
Yeah.
tough. It takes a bit of build up. And I'm sure you've
And
had the streams.
I'd promised like on Twitter, I'd told everybody if I make top 40,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, well, I gotta commit at that point, right?
Yeah.
So
But we've all had
Yeah,
the
crazy-
streams where
crazy.
you fire up and then you just bust, like in 6 minutes. You're just like, all right, that.
dude, countless.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Yeah.
for a long time, if I had made a final table when the stream was off, I just stopped doing it because I felt like I would jinx myself every time.
Right.
Because the amount of times I'd turn the stream on and then all of a sudden 15 minutes later, all right, see you guys later. I'll see you tomorrow. Like, oh, it's a brutal beat.
Okay, so you make top 4, you fire up the stream.
Mhm.
What's happening as you get down to 32? I'm sure you've been in spots like that before. Big money, 32 left. You get down to 24. You get down to 16. You get down to 8. Like, what's going through your head as you progress here? Is there any change in your mindset in terms of like, there's 150,000 up top here?
Yeah, well, I'd been that close to those kinds of scores once or twice, and I kind of always let my nerves get the better of me and ended up making one or two like two huge mistakes.
Right.
So this time around, I honestly tried not to think about the big score and just tried to think of it as any other tournament that I go deep in. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like even in tournaments where let's say first place is 20 grand, it doesn't even make me remotely nervous, even though that's still big money for any of us, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
massive money. But scale for whatever reason, this one I had to change that mindset and pretend that it's just like any other daily tournament I'm playing.
Yeah. Right. It's interesting in poker how that works, where there's like a threshold of pain, basically. Like a threshold of where it's exciting and a threshold to where you feel confident and then where you don't. And that like
Yeah.
always expands, doesn't it? Do you remember
Totally.
the $200 for the win tournaments and just like being off
Yeah.
your mind? Yeah. It's just
I remember playing, the $4 180 man sit and goes, and like winning $185 was, the highlight of my week.
yes.
And that wasn't very long ago. That was what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Mhm.
And even I remember getting nervous where like first place was $5,000.
Right.
And I still get excited to win those tournaments. Just the nerves have disappeared. That's all.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, and this one too, I'm working on moving to Vancouver. It's pretty expensive to live in that city. So like having a proper budget to survive in the city while still being a poker player, all those things were running through my mind over the last couple of weeks. And so that might have added a little extra tension to this deep run.
Right.
And I really had to cool myself down a little bit and just breathe through it. Maybe ignore the chat a little bit because people in the chat can get overhyped too.
Right.
And just play my game.
Absolutely. So, okay, so you make final 8, you're down to 7. And I'm watching on Twitch at this point. It's very late, obviously. It's 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and I'd been out ill for Sunday. But I kind of get a message from my girlfriend, actually, my fiance, like, hey, Travis's final table of the million. I'm like, whoa, let's go, man. Okay, so I tune in. Things are popping off, and people are, like, streaming in, There's so many people to watch on a Sunday. So, like, the news of a big run sort of starts to spread, and then you just see all these people pile in. and it was a pretty special feeling in the chat. Everyone was just like, "Wow, this is a real thing." So down to 7, down to 6, down to 5, down to 4. You're hitting 20K pay jumps, and now 3-handed. And then what happens here? Because it's like there's kind of a pause 3-handed. It was happening very quick, and then 3-handed there was a bit of a battle for about 20 minutes. So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, at that point I was fine with taking a deal. I still felt like I had an edge over my opponents. From what I had seen, they didn't play a whole lot of games on party, and they weren't doing anything that I considered too challenging. So I was up to continue playing, but those pay jumps are just way too big for me not to at least look at the numbers
Yeah.
and kind of go from there. The chip leader, I think he might have gotten a little greedy because he was the one who didn't tick the deal box and wasn't saying anything in the chat. And then it got to a point where I had taken over the chip lead, and I still would have been fine with the deal as well, just because I would have had a better deal, obviously.
Yeah.
And then he still didn't reply. And then once stacks kind of got a little bit even, all of a sudden he changed his mind. I mean, I was 3 out of 3 by the time we took a deal, but I was only in 3rd place. I think the difference between me and first was like 6 or 7 big blinds. It wasn't massive.
Right.
And I think that would have been, that ends up being a fair deal for most of us. We all get pretty good pay jumps. I obviously benefited the most because I think 3rd was about 65K.
Yeah.
I took a deal for 106.
Yeah.
That's usually what happens in these situations, right? So,
yeah, 65, 100, and then like 150 or 160. So like huge jumps.
Really massive, really massive. And I didn't have to give up any cash either in the deal. So that was good. I considered just continuing to battle because I really did feel like I could probably play it out with these guys. None of them were big crushers, and like I said, I didn't see them do anything too crazy. But variance can be, we've all got smacked in the face with that stuff, right? So I just didn't want to take my chances, and I wanted to try and get the best possible outcome, and I think that probably was it. Obviously, I didn't want to get hit too hard with variance once again.
Of course, yeah, that's a huge amount of money to play for 3-handed. Like, there's the two aspects of you want to gamble, you want to beat your opponents. You have the Twitch stream as well. But then it's just like, man, that's real money. Like, that's a car. That's like a year of living in Vancouver. Like, just pay the rent and the food. Like, done. Like, that's big. So, I totally get that. Well, huge congrats, man, on the result. Over 100K. So I know you're moving to Vancouver, but like, any plans with the money? It's a classic question. People always want to know, what are the plans?
I know. And it sucks because like every time you win something big, your Twitch chat goes, "What'd you do with the money? Did you celebrate? Did you go out drinking? Like, what did you do?" And every time I give them the worst responses. Like, for me, honestly, I bought pizza for my family, and then I downloaded the new Star Wars game. Like, that was how I celebrated my night, But I'm getting older, man. My big thing is I just want to make sure that like my quality of life stays sustainable and I can pay my bills without stressing about where the money's going to come from. And, at some point or another, I'd like to, help out my parents and my grandparents. I'm not at that point yet, but one day down the line, just make sure everybody's quality of life is manageable. I'm not too greedy. Like, I don't care about stuff. I'm not a very materialistic guy. Maybe like the newest PlayStation and a quality computer is about as materialistic as I go. And then after that, just make sure groceries are paid. So like that's what this is going to do for me. This is going to accomplish my goal of living in Vancouver and getting to enjoy that Vancouver life without, worrying about whether or not I got to call my landlord and say rent is going to be late.
Right. That's an interesting trend. I see that in a lot of poker players. Sustainability seems to be a real trend of just and it makes sense in the career we're in that it's so variable that securing like financial security for a long period of time and having a runway to work with is like a very desirable thing, whereas in other careers you don't really have to think about that, do you?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, that's because majority of career choices don't have variance,
right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of things that most poker players overlook, myself included, I've done it many times. I learned very much the hard way, was that variance will hit you in the face, and it can hit you in the face for a really long time.
Right.
So having a contingency is incredibly important. You know, like this big score, I'm gonna take out majority of what I won and put it into, you know, I haven't figured it out where I'm gonna put it yet, but just because like I could consider myself good enough to move up in stakes and continue grinding it out, but you know, I could also end up going on some disgusting 6 to 12 month downswing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you got, right? So just having those fallback plans, I think is really important as a poker player once you start to reach that level where you can do those types of things, you know. And I still have a bankroll to be able to play really, really good poker,
Right.
regardless. So this is like the best case scenario right now, and I just need to treat it that way and not get greedy and go like, okay, I'm gonna start having a $500 average buy-in now, you know. Like,
Yes.
I just keep going at this pace that I'm going. There's a reason why I've been able to maintain this level of success, because I'm picking a pace and I'm going at it, and I shouldn't try and like skip a few levels, you know.
Right. Absolutely. I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. So I mean, speaking of the ups and downs, let's get into the history of your poker career.
Sure.
In doing research for this interview, I looked it up. November 5th, 2015 was your first Twitch poker stream. So that's just over 5 years. I think we're two of the biggest OGs that are still out here streaming on the platform. There's a few guys like Komodo Dragon Jesus. There's another guy that was there like first month. Took some breaks as well. Can you think of anyone else that stands out?
I mean, I think your brother was streaming by the time I started.
No, he wasn't even my PA yet.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
shit. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he was
maybe,
about a year later, I think.
okay. Maybe Pav. I feel like Pav, because I remember Pav and I, we were both kind of trying to get partner at the same time, and I got partner before him, and for some reason they kept denying him.
Right.
So Pav, for sure, and
I might have my timelines mixed up here. You might have started it about a year after me, if I'm thinking about it. I might be 2014.
Yeah.
A year
Yeah.
after. Okay, so then Matt could have
Because-
been starting at the same time then.
Well, you know how I started streaming. I was a big Joe Rogan fan, and I saw your stream, or was it your stream? I think that ended up on his
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw that stream. He was podcasting with a Counter-Strike guy,
Yeah.
and they started going through the poker section, and I went, well, I love poker. Let's check this out. So I started watching you, Kevin. I think I did start watching your brother. I can't remember. And I went, well, this looks like a lot of fun. I think I can do this. And so I saved up for like a crappy $400 computer, and just figured I'd give it a shot. Like, do it as a
Right.
fun hobby. And the goal was 1,000 followers in 6 months. That was my goal. And I got there in like a month. Kevin dropped me like a big host, and it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah. Was that kind of your intro to poker, or were you playing before you started streaming?
Yeah, I mean, I was playing very much recreationally, but so my goal was I was studying to be an actor. So I went to film school, and my ultimate goal in life was my day job would be a poker player. So I'd pay the bills playing poker, and then I would have the freedom to like audition and take classes and do indie films and stuff like that. So I tried to treat poker with some level of seriousness. When I look back now, I realize how awful I was back then.
Right.
But the goal was always to do some level of full-time poker, and streaming ended up motivating me more actually to get better at the game, because obviously that brings you more viewers, right?
Yeah. More social pressure, to like perform, more people rooting you on, more people rooting against you that you want to prove wrong, like all that.
100%. Yeah, all of the above. All of the above.
Absolutely. Okay, so you get into streaming. That Rogan thing was crazy, by the way. I mean, just random chance. He's trying to figure out what Twitch is, and then he just sees my stream, and clicks on it, and then my chat exploded at the time. I had no idea what was going on.
What was that like? Like, obviously you knew who Joe Rogan was at the time. Like, were you freaking out or what?
I wasn't really freaking out, man. I knew of Joe Rogan, but I was just kind of in this weird dreamland where just like everything was happening at the same time. Like, I got a shout out from Calix on social media. He's like a big YouTuber here in the UK. Like, things were just popping off, and I was just kind of in it. I was just like, all right, well, this is what's happening now. So I'm gonna go on the Rogan show. I was just ready.
Yeah.
it wasn't weird. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was a little inflated at the time. In
Sure.
hindsight, maybe it was a bigger deal than I gave it credit for.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, okay. So you start streaming, and then what's the progression like? Because you grew pretty quickly, I think, back in those days.
Yeah.
And then you took some time off and then came back. So where does the story go from there?
Yeah, so I mean, things have been really bumpy for me. I've never been the guy who like you. I think you've kind of just started off with a roll and grew it. You never had to restart, right?
Right.
I had to restart too many times because I was too much of a degen.
Right.
You know,
Hence the name.
and hence the name. And I mean, this time was a little bit different in that perhaps I was practicing bad bankroll management, but I was also just had a bad lifestyle outside of poker. I was going out too much. I was spending too much money on stupid, frivolous things. I was just very, very irresponsible with how I handled my life financially, and that was turned into an inevitable downfall. And I had to quit, and I had to kind of swallow my pride a little bit, tell everybody that poker wasn't happening now. I was still pretty hungry to come back and make it happen. Perhaps that's once again the degen in me, but I've always had this feeling that I could make a success out of poker because I loved the game so much. It was less to do about the money and more to do about the competition, and the type of intellect it takes to be a successful poker player. I felt like I had those capabilities, so I took 6 months off. I went and got my old job as a security guard.
Right.
Miserable job, working graveyard shifts. Working with nobody at 3:00 in the morning. So yeah, that was my dad.
Hey, Dad, famous from the stream on Sunday.
Yeah,
Degen Dad.
Degen Dad. So yeah, I went and got a job and hated it, and kind of went through a little bit of an existential crisis, wondering what I was gonna do, but just kind of went through the motions. And my best friend Alex Saladzi, who's also a professional poker player, he's been a pro for a long time. He would stake me for like the occasional low mid stakes Sunday. And finally one Saturday came along. I won first place money, but I finished second in a $27 scoop for about $35K.
Right.
And I got to keep 40% of that, and things restarted again.
And what's the timeline on this? When was this sort of happening? How long
So
ago?
I quit playing poker. I think it was around January of 2017. And then I went back to full-time poker July of the same year.
Right.
So all things considered, a fairly fast turnaround
Yeah.
compared to a lot of people who might, be in the same situation as me. But still like a huge learning experience. The biggest learning experience being humility.
Well, and this is just 2 years ago. This is
not
this
long
is
ago.
very recent. Yeah.
Dude, I mean, I say this a lot on stream, but 2.5 years ago, I was wondering where I was going to get the cash to pay for the train to go to work.
Right.
Like, that's how broke I was. I had to go to the food bank.
Yeah.
And trying not to. My parents aren't very well off, so my parents are so selfless that if I asked to borrow money, they would do it, but it's not money that they have. They would like get out their credit card or whatever. So like I hate putting them in that situation. So I tried to do everything that I could to survive on my own. And it was very emotionally, it was rough, and I was embarrassed, and I felt I was very depressed, and I lost a lot of self-esteem at that time because I felt like a failure, and I was incredibly embarrassed. I still liked hanging out in the Twitch poker channels, and overall people were pretty supportive about it, but you always get those guys who want to take advantage of whatever pitfalls and use it against you. And it was a tough one to get through, but it was a huge learning experience in my life. Like I said earlier, humility is huge. There's a lot of merit in just swallowing your pride and admitting when you've messed up and not blaming it on any outside circumstances, even if maybe there are some
Right.
things that were outside of your control, you'll benefit from just admitting that you messed up,
I think that's a great mindset. I like that.
and using that as a learning experience when you get into a successful situation later on.
Right.
And so that, I mean, that's been huge for me over the last 2 years. Whenever I go through a major downswing or I take too many shots, just swallowing my pride and going, all right, I'm not going to play $200 MTTs for a while. I'll go back to playing $33 MTTs or whatever it is, and realizing that the people who judge you for those things are people whose opinions shouldn't really matter to you anyway.
Yeah, totally understand. Yeah, it's an interesting thing on Twitch with that, because you're getting so many opinions and so many voices coming at you, and it's a dangerous thing in that it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy of you're the best, and then it can also be just endlessly toxic where it hurts your mindset and your confidence and all that. So it swings, both ways. We both have had to deal with that, for sure. I want to talk about your parents a little bit because, you talk about your history in this game and what a rise, man, to think 2 years ago you were just getting back into streaming, after a lucky shot or stake on a Sunday, like to give it another shot, and you just won 100K a few days ago. But how were your parents through all of this? Poker in Canada, I can give context, is, it's understood by a small pocket of the population, but I'd say over half the population doesn't understand the difference between poker and casino gambling.
Right.
And that's very different than it is here in the UK where I'm currently living, where it's like a very positive thing and everyone knows that poker players exist and it's a skill game. That's not true where we're from in Canada. So what did your parents think about poker and your career, and how has that progressed?
Yeah, I mean, they've always been hesitant and there's always been a tiny bit of pushback, but I'm very fortunate in that my parents have kind of always been supportive of what I wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to be an actor, for Christ's sakes, right? I mean, that's not exactly a sustainable career either,
Yeah.
And they were all for it when I'd originally gone to business school, and first semester I told my parents I'm not doing this, I'm dropping out and I'm going to go to film school, and there was no arguing about it at all. They were totally fine with it. So when poker became a little serious, we had our bad moments where, they had tried to lecture me out of it. And sometimes I listened and sometimes I didn't. But once I started making money at a decent clip, things became a lot easier to talk about. And truth be told, streaming really helped with that conversation, because there's an income out of that. There's sponsorship opportunities. So having some supplementary income really helped kind of, ease the mind a little bit for them.
Right. Yeah. The consistency, like the non-gambling up and down income,
exactly.
That certainly helped with the perspective of my family as well. That regularity.
100%. And then, the more I talk about poker with them and just try and make them understand that it is a skill game and it's not a scratch ticket, I think probably helped a lot too. And they see the type of work that I have to put in off stream to make it happen. And I think also them seeing me talk about poker, like they like to watch my stream pretty often,
right.
Really helped them understand that poker is more than just going to the casino. It's it takes a lot of work to even just be a mid-tier good player,
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
they're really supportive now. They're excited all the time. I mean, people see it on stream. I'm staying at my parents' house right now while I look for an apartment. They always come in and check up on me and be like, "Okay, what are you doing? All right, good luck. Be careful." Especially my dad. My dad's really loves it.
Right.
So, yeah. It's still like a bit of a weird subject, like among my extended family. So I was in New Zealand for a while, right? My dad's side of the family lives there. And, I go to the family dinner with the aunties and uncles and the grandparents, and they never bring up the word poker. It's like they go, "So how you doing? You all right? Everything okay?"
Yes.
And what they're saying is, "Are you still playing poker? Is poker treating you well?
There's
Are you
definitely
broke
the
yet?"
implication of like fear of people being worried, checking in if you're okay. I get that all the time too.
Yeah.
Or also so are you thinking about going back to school, or like, what are your plan,
Yeah.
like that sort of thing,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. And, I think it's something we're talking about. I mean, poker sustainability, I think poker is fine. I think poker is going to do well going forward, but uh, obviously our career is very intertwined with Twitch as well.
Mhm.
Uh, so what do you think about Twitch streaming? There's been a lot of conversation about the sustainability of this career. You've been at it for 4 years. I've been at it for 5. There's not very many people that have sustained a career of creating content around poker for a long time. It just
Mhm.
doesn't happen very much. So what do you think about what we're doing here on Twitch, and what's important going forward to make sure it continues to thrive?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot about, so I'm a big film nut, and I think a lot about people perhaps that I admired in the 90s or early 2000s, and you won't hear of them now.
Yeah.
Entertainment in general, no matter what genre it is very fickle, and a career is not sustainable for most people. um but then every now and again there's a there's a Mark Wahlberg who's still in it 30 years later,
Right.
so uh you know streaming is very much the same. It's hard to stay consistent, and it's even harder to stay consistently on top. um it it is possible. It's just about, you know if your drive is there. If your drive disappears, then streaming is definitely something that you have to quit.
Right.
But um I think Twitch poker is here to stay. It's just about making sure that you stay in line with whatever meta is going on and whatever ends up working for your numbers, and at least a steady, gradual, continued growth. I constantly think about whether or not I want to continue streaming. Often, what keeps me streaming is the fact that I just really enjoy it. Um, Sometimes my growth stagnates, and I wonder what's the point. Um, but then I have moments like this where I win 100 grand and everybody's hype, and I get, you know 80 DMs in the span of 24 hours telling me congratulations and you deserve it and you're blah 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 blah. That it keeps me motivated to keep going. So, um, you know, if anybody argues that it's unsustainable, it's just because they see so many people who um, lack the desire to continue streaming or lack the consistency to actually make a success out of it.
Right.
Um, Twitch favors the consistent.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to. And it's really hard to be consistent for all of us. I think we've all had moments where we just could not commit, no matter how hard we tried. And for some people, when they stop, finding that drive to restart is really, really tough.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, consistency and volume is so important for growing as a creator. So it really is a volume game to gain relevancy on the platform and have people
Mm-hmm.
actually find your show and watch your show. But
Mm-hmm.
then the volume that you put into a show, I mean, it's not like a normal thing where you can just work a 40-hour stream week and it
Yeah.
feels like a 40-hour week. It doesn't. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like an 80-hour week. It's insane to
Yep.
do 40 live hours of broadcasting. It
Yeah.
it feels super insane. So that isn't something that I think normal humans are created to do in poker specifically, because you're competing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Might be a little bit different in video games. So
Yeah.
how do you be consistent and grind and gain relevancy and be known, but then also scale back to where you're streaming an amount that'll allow you to do it over several years? That to me is the interesting situation we're in now, of like, can you stream 3 days a week and still be a successful broadcaster long term?
So I think a lot of people are actually going to disagree with me on this, but I think you can be a successful streamer and still stream like 3 or 4 days a week. But that's with the caveat that, your content is really good.
Right.
So if you're just a run-of-the-mill streamer and you're kind of doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, then yeah, you're just going to fall by the wayside. But if you're really good at, promoting your stream, you're using that free time to make YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram content, you can do really well as a streamer. And that's actually the path that I'm trying to go on, is just scale back my hours streamed and scale up the content creation side, making
Yes.
more off-platform stuff. And that also actually helps with like my engagement when I'm streaming. I have the energy and I don't burn out.
Yeah.
So
Right.
finding some level of balance, I think, is really, really huge. As for how to be consistent over the long run, it to me, and this perhaps sounds a little too woo woo, is that like you just have to love it. That's what it comes down to. I've never really had to push myself to be consistent. I've just always really enjoyed content creation and, you know, having a little community of people who want to talk life and talk movies and mixed martial arts and watch me play poker.
Right.
And be honest with yourself. If your love isn't there to commit, then head out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
And I think that's why we also see a lot of big, like we've had some big streamers in Twitch poker leave. And it's just because they're just not into it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, even when they've been like, you know, Tonka left, what, a year and a half ago, he just wasn't into it anymore. Even though he was at the top of the listing, he had all the opportunity in the world to make a huge success out of streaming. And he just went, I'm not into it. I'm gonna peace out.
The financial aspect too is interesting in poker, because if you hit a certain threshold, especially with Tonka, such a successful, you know, tournament poker player, has made a ton of money playing poker over his career, like tons. So for him, like the financial upside of continuing to stress himself out making content is not as high as it is for some of the other people, you know. So that's financial motivation is gone.
That's a really good point. And you sacrifice, you know, you sacrifice perhaps a significant amount of skill as well, especially with the level that he's playing at,
right?
Where you need every possible edge you can to be successful with the stakes that you're playing. The upside of streaming is probably not there, I would imagine.
Right.
So yeah, I mean that's perhaps I'm using a bad example. It is a bit of a tough spot for poker streamers because unlike video game streamers, you have your opponents watching you. You're distracted while looking at chat while you're trying to play hands. There's all these different things going on, all these different variables that you know, normal poker players aren't experiencing. So trying to figure out the pros and cons can be, I think, is going to be different for all of us probably.
See here, like I have a slightly different take on this because I hear this all the time of like you're giving up an edge. But you know, me and you, we're playing in a lot of the same tournaments, right? We both play in this 215 million.
Yep.
You know, how do any of the other regs have any time to tune into my stream, watch me play hands, most of which are just folds, most of which are just very standard, and then maybe pick up something that I'm doing slightly different? It's going to take you an hour to learn something that's actionable on me and my strategy that you can then use against me, right? And we're in the same tournament, so why aren't they going to your stream and picking up your thing after an hour of being actionable? Like it's such small pieces of information that people actually garner by watching the show, and they don't have time to go through all the streams and pick up every strategy. It's a waste of your time. You should work on your own game and your own frequencies. That's going to be much more profitable. So I agree in the sense of high stakes sit and goes. If you're playing, you know, $500 spins, or you're playing 5K sit and goes and it's a very small pool, like I get that. You can't give away all your frequencies if you're playing the same people every day. But like tournaments or even cash games in like a fast forward pool, I just think it's not a good use of anyone's time to actually even research you or study you. It's wasting their time.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends on what edge you think you have over the streamer and if it's even like relevant to be watching over their play. I think we do give up a lot of information. I mean, I know first off, you know, like I said, my buddy Alex, you know, he'll be in a hand versus a streamer and he'll go, yeah, I found a timing tell because I noticed he did this thing where he snap folded on the river with blah blah blah,
right?
And you know, that stuff adds up over time, you know, especially with the kind of volume that we put in.
I don't buy it, Alex. I don't buy your timing tell, man. All right, I'm playing 9 tables, okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes I gotta act fast because I have a chat question, and sometimes I'm acting slow because I'm in the middle of answering something. I don't buy it, Alex.
That's true. I
going.
mean, that's a fair argument. That's a fair argument. I you know, I mean, it's tough, you know, that less to do with perhaps opponents looking over us, but the where we are come at a significant disadvantage is just the the amount of stuff we have to do while streaming poker can be to our detriment sometimes. So, you know, like, you know, most regs are playing whatever 12 to 15 tables or something crazy, right? I play down 8 tables, rarely more than 9, you know, because we have to do so much, and we will make mistakes that maybe we might not have made if we weren't streaming, you know? So I think that's the most important aspect, where like there's a difference between us and the players, that we have to kind of deal with that and hope that it doesn't come to our detriment, you know?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where are you going from here now? You've hit this 100K score in poker. You know, your stream's popping off, it's growing. So where is the spot that DramaticDegen is going towards?
It's a good question, man. You know, I finished second in a Power Fest earlier in the year, right? And that was where the real life-changing money came for me. And it was a smaller score. It was like 75K. I had like 80% of myself, so pretty damn big score for me. And before then, I was just grinding enough to keep the rent paid for the most part. And I was doing well at that. But I was always stressing out, being like, okay, are the next 3 months expenses covered? Okay, we're okay. And just that's constantly on my mind, you know? And then when I got to that big score of the 60K, I actually lost a lot of motivation for a little while, because I was like, well, I got there. I don't have to worry about how my bills are going to get paid. That was always the big goal for me. How do I keep my bills paid? And I realized that the goal needs to be less monetary for me now, and more what do I need to do to improve my quality of life, or i.e. my happiness, you know? And for me, happiness is continuously getting better at the things that I'm passionate about, maintaining healthy, loving relationships with the people I care about, and exploring all my interests and passions, so even outside of poker. So that's kind of still the same goal. Things haven't really changed for me. Now it's just, okay, I mean, I have around a $50 average buy-in. What is it going to take for me to be good enough to beat $80 average buy-in, $100, $200 average buy-in? So there's a ton to learn, right? And that's going to take me years for that to happen. And it's never going to be monetary. And sorry, I got a frog in my throat. But that hasn't changed, and it's still not changing even now. It just means that now I have more flexibility over the coming months or years, and just setting myself up to be successful in that regard.
Right.
Yeah. As far from a streaming standpoint, I mean, I've always felt like I've been a good enough streamer to be among the top. I think right now, if you like look on Solunome or something, I'm maybe like in the top 30. I really think that in a year or 2 years time, I could be top 10. It's just going to take some big changes in other aspects of the way I stream and the way I produce content.
I know so you can for sure, man. You can definitely get to that top 10. You know, and I think what we're doing with Party Poker Team Online, you know, really focusing on trying to create as much content from that pillar 8-hour piece of content. You know, I'm hoping that it pays off, and all of us continue to sort of grow and thrive in the listing. So you can do it for sure.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I agree. I think all the people who are part of Team Online are capable of being in those upper echelons as well. You know, it's just about how we go about creating that content. And once again, the key word, how consistent can we all be?
Yeah.
And I think we're all capable of it. And I know I'm definitely capable of it. It just needs to become more of a regular part of my day-to-day life. And then just be happy with gradual progress and not instant progress, you know?
Yeah.
And because, like, you know, the last 2 or 3 months, I felt like I've very much stagnated in my growth despite the amount of work that I've put in. And it takes things like this big win for the plateau to disappear, and you start to see that gradual progress again.
Right.
After that 100K win on Sunday, I streamed on Monday and I averaged 80 concurrent viewers, right? you know, it's not an instantaneous thing. You're not going to get 1,000 viewers overnight.
Right.
But 80 viewers is still like a 25% increase in my average viewership. So I need to appreciate it for what it is and use that as a launching pad to continue moving upwards.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a correlation in poker pros, and especially tournament poker pros, and like wanting the big success quickly, because it's just in the nature of the format we play, which is
Of course.
the big score, you know, the one that you had on Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, we may be actually, well, we are grinding out an hourly where we earn, you know, X amount of dollars per hour, but in reality, it feels much more like a down up, you know, down up, swinging all over the place. So I've found for myself personally, and people I've talked with, like it works the same way in life. That patience is like hard for us, and like the constant grind of just slow progress is not natural. At least for me, it isn't. So
I mean, especially when you see your peers doing well, and you might even consider yourself on the level of them, and they're doing better than you. You really have to put it in your head, and this is something that I learned through acting school, was that everybody's journey is different. One guy's going to get successful straight away. One guy's going to get successful in 10 years. And then the rest of us are going to be somewhere in between.
Yes. Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And that, well, that's how variance works too, you know? And if you can remind yourself that like, if you keep putting the work in, it's going to come to you. Keep putting the work in, it's going to come to you. It'll come to you, you know?
Yeah.
Majority of us are just not going to have it overnight.
Yeah. Well, you know, especially in today's social media age, and even Twitch age, where we're seeing scores pop off every weekend on Twitch.
Sure.
And we're seeing people share their scores on Instagram. Like, you're getting a best of collection from the whole poker world. So it's easy to think that you don't match up, and that you're not as good as you should be, because you're getting this constant reinforcement of like, look at all this money. But it's not. Yeah. It's not real, you know, is it?
No.
It's not at all.
And I'm definitely a victim to that. I look at, you know, all the people I follow on Instagram and stuff, and it's a mental test. Like you have to show some level of self-awareness and just be like, it's not your time. Yeah. Am I putting the work in? Be as self-reflective as you can, and ignore the rest of it.
Yeah.
And it will come. You just have to. It's something you almost have to just nail into your head constantly, to the point that it gets annoying. It'll come.
I really think like comparing yourself to other people is not the way to go in poker, because I think there's no positives. One, either you're going to get down on yourself of like, other people are doing better than me, I'm not very good, which isn't productive, unless that's going to spur some level of motivation where you want to fight them and get better. I don't know. But for me, that doesn't help. And then if you're using it to like try and improve and get there, like I think it puts a limit on your ability. So one thing that people ask me in my chat all the time, which is like, what's a good big blind per 100 win rate at the $22 buy-in level? And I'm like, well, good doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter what other people are accomplishing, whether you're worse than them or you're better than them. Who cares? Look at it today, try and improve it, and see if you can make it better tomorrow. Because there's no cap. You know, we haven't solved this game. We haven't figured it out. You know, you can have a 25 big blind per 100 if you learn to exploit people well enough. You know, I don't think anyone's accomplishing that currently in most games, but why not? So what's the point of comparing to other people? You know, good is determined by you, I think.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree with that. I mean, for the most part in poker, there just aren't really any parameters. You're going to benefit greatly from just comparing to who you were a week ago.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that isn't talked about in poker enough, is also your lifestyle. Now, I mean, I'm really unhealthy. I have awful eating habits, but I always try to be reflective of my mood and my mental state, and where I stand when things are going bad, where I stand when things are going good. And that's actually going to have a huge causal effect on how you're playing poker.
Right.
The mentality of it all. I mean, it is a conversation that's had, but I think a lot of people don't address it enough. Just mental health.
Yeah.
you know, when you're on a downswing, I mean, I've lost relationships because of downswings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a girl break up with me when I was in the middle of a downswing because I was so insufferable to deal with, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And you can't be living life like that where you're only in a good mood when you're winning, you know?
Yeah. It's a waste of
Because
this career if you are.
it's a total waste.
Yeah.
It's a total waste. And you end up being put into, you know, you're in sinking sand when you're in quicksand when you're on a downswing, because it'll only get worse, especially if you don't have the mentality to get yourself out of it, where you're just hating on everybody else, and you'll get depressed. And that's why a lot of people end up leaving, is because their lifestyle is miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the belief that poker can make you a better person. I truly believe that, if you do the right things towards making you a better person. So, you know, and I got to do this. I'm definitely not going to try and be a hypocrite here, but eating better, you know, getting a little bit of exercise, studying, you know, taking breaks to go do completely non-poker related things. And once again, like I said earlier, like, maintain your relationships with the people you care about. Do those things in a proactive effort. And as you become a more successful poker player, you'll be a more successful all-around person.
Yeah. I'm with you. I read a book recently, and I forget the title, but you know, it said the equation for progress is stress plus rest, which really hit home for me, because you know, we stress ourselves all the time, and that's the focus on productivity of like studying our game, putting in long hours, you know, but the rest part is needed to gain the strength to push further and beyond. So, you know, there isn't a lot of focus put on rest in poker. You know, the need to like take your brain off, sleep, get away from it all, and then come back stronger and push further. You know, that isn't something we talk about very much. But to me, when I was at my peak in this game, which I don't think is now, you know, I'd like to hit it again, even though financially it's been a great year for me poker wise. Everything in my life revolved around poker, in a way that, like, when I was eating dinner, what I ate at dinner was an edge I was gaining on my opponents. If I had extra broccoli in relation to bread, that was me gaining an edge. If I had an extra 30 minutes of sleep, that was me gaining an edge. If I got off my phone 30 minutes before bed so that I could have better quality sleep, that was an edge I was getting on my opponents that weren't doing that. So, like, everything in my life was a competition in what was most important to me at the time, which was purely poker.
I like it. I think that's actually kind of it reminds me of, you know, Mike Tyson. He used to like waking up at 4:30 in the morning to jog because he knew none of his opponents would wake up that early.
It's all
You
a
know?
competition, man. Everything.
Yeah.
Everything in life, you know? Like, you can look at as, is this a plus EV in my life or a minus EV or a neutral? And so, yeah, I think that there's a way to apply that. Now, getting a fiance, you know, you throw in these different interests, and life isn't all about, you know, poker anymore. You got to balance, but
and it can also make you a boring person too if your only interest is poker. You know, like, if I'm hanging out with my family, they don't care about poker.
No,
all they know is that you know, you win a flip ace king versus queens. They don't know anything else besides that. You know, like, I remember I had a cousin over when I was doing the stream house with the guys a year ago in New Zealand. We were talking about poker, and my buddy was like, "You might as well be speaking Chinese. I have no idea what the hell you guys are talking about."
Right.
This bored the hell out of me, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, have a little variety in life, and it will, there's no negative to gain out of that.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? It's like, I mean, you do make a sacrifice on your poker ability when you do that, but there is more to life than just poker.
Well, I guess it comes back to, like, talking about goals, right? So, do you want to be a guy who's playing the 250K high rollers? Then that's the mentality you got to be, where, like, I get an extra half hour sleep, I eat broccoli, I do all those things.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Me, I never cared about that stuff.
Right.
I
broccoli is the bomb, man, though. I mean,
broccoli is the bomb.
Yeah,
I
it's
agree.
good. It's good.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you there. But, you know, just figuring out where you want to be in poker. For me, it was always that I wanted to have a decent quality of life. I wanted to be sustainable, and I wanted to be able to make sure that I could cover all my bills and be financially independent.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you have to be elite. That does mean that you have to constantly strive to be better, obviously. Right. But that doesn't mean that I have to sacrifice as much aspects of my life. There's still some sacrifice. That's inevitable, but it doesn't mean that I have to completely shut off other things in my life to get there.
100%.
Which you would have to do to be elite. You just can't. There is no balanced life if you want to be an elite reg.
Yeah. That's the world we live in, isn't it? Like if
it is.
You know, you have to specialize if you want to become the best of the best at anything.
If you want to become a world champ in the UFC, your life has to be beating the crap out of people and working out every day.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So
that's the rub. That's what life is about. All right, so we have a hand here. I've watched these two before, Pavel and Andre. All right, it looks like we're going to the flop. Small blind against the button.
Jack of hearts.
Pavel in the small blind. Okay.
And the backdoor nut flush draw. Andre, though, will take a stab at this one.
Okay, so he bets big.
Do you like the c-bet with 10-6?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the flops that you should probably check back on. It hits the big, especially hits the small blinds range not too badly. But if you're going to bet, you need to bet big here.
Right.
That's for sure.
Pretty connected. A lot of straight draws and flush draws. Like you want to choose a bigger sizing. Okay. Very interesting turn. Pavel having top pair. The nut flush draw he picked up on the turn, and Andre now has a double gutter. So you have 10-6 of spades here. You don't block the flush. Do you continue the bluff?
I would probably shut down here. Once the small blind calls a big bet, this is just like way too well connected. Not having a heart in your hand, I think, is probably to your detriment as well.
Goes huge, 40
right.
million.
You also think about like how many fours the small blind have. Really, probably none or very few. None. It's much more concentrated towards the jack. Sometimes the 8, but also like the straight draws that just hit a pair or the flush draws that just hit a flush. So that this is definitely
8, 9, 9, 10, jack 10.
Yeah.
You're not really getting them to fold anything on the turn. If you're going to bet this big, you have to commit to a pretty massive bet on the river.
Yeah.
Maybe even like an overbet on the river, I think. But
well, and there's going to be all in by the river. You know, Pavel has 117 million back, so we're not even super deep here.
The 8 of hearts. Well, Pavel makes the nut flush.
Okay.
10 high.
I think this is an awful river to triple. I think it needs to be checked back. But I mean, man, when you make that big of a bet on the turn, it's kind of hard not to commit to just going for it on the river, you know?
What bluffs does Andre have here, you know? On this heart, like, it's kind of tough to come up with very many bluffs that can just triple it off of this spot.
Especially when Pavel is repping such a tight, strong range, calling 2 big bets on flop and turn.
And he has gone all in.
You know, this is a river card that even he still connects with. So pocket 4 is 8, 9. I mean, you get perhaps like jack 9 of diamonds to fold by the river, I suppose.
The way Andre's been playing, I cannot imagine.
Yeah, I mean, 8 is not a card that Andre is supposed to have unless he has a 2-pair full house. But Pavel also doesn't have too many 8s on the turn either, just like 8x.
Just 8, 9 suited. That's like kind of all I can really. Maybe like ace. No, not even ace 8. Never mind. Yeah.
But you can't really fold here with the ace high flush. Like it's too unlikely that Andre has a full house to fold, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's probably there's just not a lot of value here, especially when you have the jack blocker as well. So you're blocking all those 2 pairs.
Yeah.
Andre will show him the
I don't blame him for thinking about it just for a minute. I mean, I know it seems like a bit of a nit roll, but it's just such a weird line to take when he has the heart blocker and the jack blocker.
Do you think it's a different answer if he has, like, let's say ace 3 or something without the blocker? You know, do you think
a little bit, but I think the hand's just a little too strong, especially with the line to ever really justify fold. It's kind of one of those spots where you just flick it in knowing that every now and again you're going to be beat, but not often enough. And if Andre's good enough, like, he should be bluffing things like you know, like ace 5 with the 5 of hearts, you know, where it just doesn't have that showdown value, so you turn your low flush into a bluff.
Right. Yeah.
At least I think in theory. Yeah, I mean, you got to admire the balls on Andre to be able to make
There's
such a
something
bluff.
to that, man. Like these big spots, big final tables where you have to assume that your opponents are not calling correctly. And I think that's fair to assume, you know. It's when I'm in that spot, I make the assumption that my opponent is not over bluffing. They're not bluffing more than they should at this big final table spot. In which case, they're probably under bluffing, and I should probably call a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
That's something you can play off, I think, in those spots. The meta game is interesting there.
No, exactly, and I think that's probably why Pavel was kind of in the tank for a little bit. I mean, he didn't tank for too long, but I think that's why he nit rolled him a little bit, was just because these are probably pretty big pay jumps. This is the final table, right? So, you know, how many bluffs does he really have?
Yeah.
But the issue is obviously he has the nut flush, so there's that. And that jack blocker is just too big, blocking jack 8, jack 9. You know, he just doesn't have as many full house combos. And especially the 8 on the river. Now the set of 8s has pretty much disappeared. He's got that one combo of 8s. That's it.
Yeah.
So, you know, you just got to think it through and kind of make sure that all your ducks in a row, and you just have to flick it in. Yeah, well, it's a good question, though, like you said earlier. Like, what if you had ace 3 with the ace of hearts? It's a tiny bit tougher.
I still think it's call. I still think it's too strong then.
Of course, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of more saying, like, it's a little bit more of a tank worthy.
It is, yeah. What about king jack with the jack blocker and the king of hearts?
Oh,
then
that's
it's
a real tank.
Then I think it's a fold. Then I'm folding. I think that's the line for me. It has to be the nut flush.
Oh man, that might honestly have to be one of those spots where, like, you know, you see some of those regs, they look at their watch and it's like, if it's between 1 and 20, then I'll call or whatever, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's an interesting spot. I mean, I always, regardless of whether or not it's a bad bluff or a good bluff, I always have respect for a guy like Andre who's just willing to go for it, especially at a final table.
Yes,
with that kind of money on the line, because there's a lot of people online or live who just don't have the heart to make those types of bluffs.
It's so much better to fail that way. You know, when you think about how people fail in poker, they fail by being too tight. Hardly ever are people too aggressive. And maybe this is a case where it is too aggressive, but it's just such a better tendency to get people to fold so many hands and be over aggressive than it is to be over tight. And I wish I could say that that's how I fail. It isn't. Yeah. You know, like, my natural tendency is, you know, a passive Canadian kid, right? So it's just like, my personality plays in there.
Unless you're playing at a really high level, I think that's all of us. Perhaps some of us are more aggressive than others in certain spots, but, you know, for example, if you're in a tough spot where a dude re-raises you on the river, you don't have to feel too bad about folding. You know, everyone's too passive, and aggressive is going to be king here. Aggressiveness, for anybody who's wondering if they're not tight enough, try a few punts. You'll learn better that way.
Yes, don't be afraid of the punts. See, that's why the businessmen are so successful at, like, the high stakes games, and why they're willing to play against some of the best, because they punt all the time, because it doesn't matter, and it's scary. I mean, do you want to call off for $500,000 in a cash game where, like, that represents a huge amount of your net worth into this business person? It's just like another walk in the park, you know, another day. You know, they fail by being too aggressive. Maybe there's a correlation there in terms of their life success and their ability to fail.
Maybe there is something to be learned from the big businessmen, for sure.
There could be. I mean, I think that's fair to say that there is some things to learn.
Yeah.
Travis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week, man. Really appreciate it. Super happy for your huge score, and I know things are going to continue trending onwards and upwards for you, dude. Where can people check you out if they want to continue to follow your story in life with streaming, whatever it is you're working on? Let them know.
Yeah, so I mean, both on YouTube and Twitch.tv, you can find me by just typing in DramaticDegen, all one word. And then on Twitter is TJ Darroch and T Darroch on Instagram. So those are going to be my main platforms.
Awesome. Check them out. That highlight on the PartyPoker Million's already up, actually, so it's out there.
That's right. Yeah, watch it. I posted a YouTube video like within 12 hours, my editor Jason was so excited for me. He stayed up till 5 a.m. editing it out.
Did he?
Just to
Damn,
pump it
Jason,
out.
come on, man. Let's go.
Yeah, strike while the iron's hot, man.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome, dude.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Cheers. Thanks, man.
Big thanks again to Travis for taking the time to talk with me about his success. I think it was a great conversation. So make sure to go check him out, give him the follow, and let me know what you thought about that conversation. Now, before I let you go for the week, we of course have to talk about our weekly contest we have here, Hero of the Week. Okay, so last week there was 824 entries in the Thursday flight. Man Illusion, Daniel guessed 820. There was a guess of 823, but it came at 9:15 when late registration was shut. So that was too late of a guess. Daniel, you got to reply to your DM from Party Poker to claim your winning ticket. Okay, so at Man Illusion, it's good to see you, by the way, man. Make sure you respond so that you can get your ticket for the Party Poker Million. This week's Party Poker Million, we're going to do a guessing competition. Okay, use the hashtag JSPokerHero on Twitter with your guess to be eligible, and you obviously need to guess before the tournament actually starts for the guest to be eligible. Okay, so this is going to be for a $215 million ticket. It is open to all of you, and let's get into it. So, as you know, the $215 million has several start flights. Okay, and the first start flight is actually on a Sunday, so you can play on the Sunday when there's a day 2 going on for the next Sunday's day 2. So this Sunday, that would be Sunday, the 24th of November, there's going to be a day 1A flight. That's a flight I'm going to be playing. How many entrants are going to be in the day 1A flight of the Party Poker Million this Sunday? Get your guesses in on Twitter, hashtag JSPokerHero. The closest guest that guesses before the tournament starts is going to win a $215 million ticket. So best of luck, everyone. And thank you so much for checking out the show this week. I think it was a good one. Apologies again on missing last week with the illness. I'm on the mend, so I should be full strength by next week, but hopefully my sniffling didn't bother you too much this week. Thanks so much, but until next time, we'll see you later.